The big giant voice. Senator Robinson, we got a quorum this morning. Thank you, Senator. Well, good morning. I thank all those in the audience who are here. Diehards, we appreciate you being here. And we have one bill this morning, and it is House Bill 4130, committee sub. You have it before you. Can you guys hear me okay? This seems kind of loud. This is very loud. Is there a way to turn that down, Carlos? Please. I'm getting a lot of feedback up here.
Some would say that's the voice of God coming from the chairman's chair.
I wouldn't say that at all. That's far from it. But what you have, this is the student funding formula that we have agreed with the House on. It is, as you can tell, what, 300, 400 pages long. Really, the first 30 pages are the formula, okay? So what the bill does is it creates, we took the best part of the House bill, which was the weights. We've made changes to it, and we've inserted and created a new objective formula. This is something that we all knew we'd probably be in this spot like we always do with a House. And so for the last month or so, myself, Sam, Leah Smith, Max, Corbin, and others, significant others, have come up with a new objective formula to fund our schools. And this is called the Mississippi Student Funding Formula. That's the title, that's the formula, it's nothing else. And I'll go through the formula itself. I don't have the line items for the bill, but the objective formula, basically section 1 is the title, section 2 are the definitions, sections 3 is the objective formula, 4 is the weights, if you go through these sections. On the floor, you'll see a spreadsheet showing the allocations for each school district. So we'll pass that out on the floor if it makes out of committee. So the objective formula establishes the base student cost. The base student cost is derived more now, it's now based on teacher salaries, getting money in the classroom, and ensuring that the vast majority of the money is going to the classroom. So and that's called the first component of the base student cost is the instructional component, and that's derived. And so let me back up. The base student cost this year, we're establishing it at $6,695.34. That is going to be the BSC this year, and it's going to be calculated in subsequent years based upon, like MAP was, the revisions that we passed on 25% of the BSC times a 20-year inflationary index. And then in the fourth year, we do a recalculation. So this first year, we're setting the BSC at $66.95.34. Of that, you have an instructional component, which is derived by dividing the average teacher salary by the number of the student-teacher ratio. The student-teacher ratio was derived by dividing the number of students per net enrollment divided by the number of teachers. This year, that is 14. The average teacher salary divided by 14 students, we come to a calculation of $3,811. We add an administrative component to that, which is 20% of the BSC. 20% of the $66.95 is $762. We then have add an ancillary component to that, which is 30% of the BSC, which is $1143.30. And then we have an O&M, or an operation and maintenance component, which is a 3-year average based on what an O&M cost would be for a school district. And so that is how we get to $66.95. Then we can add, that's where the weights come in. The weights are important because we specifically identify students who may need additional instruction or additional care when providing instruction. And that is broken down into 9 categories. Yes, 9 categories. We have low-income students. These are some of the house. Low-income English language learners, SPED 1, 2, and 3, and CTE. We also have a gifted component, a concentrated poverty component, and a sparsity component. And I'll go through each of those. And these are in section 4 of the bill. Low income, we multiply low income students as that's defined through a direct certification from the USDA. That includes recipients of SNAP or TANF or a food distribution program or other data. That's 30% of the BSC. 30% of the BSC amounts to roughly $2,000 per student. Then you have English language learners. That is 15% of the BSC. Those are lawful permanent residents or those students who English is a second language. Then we have SPED 1, which is 60% of the BSC. That is roughly $4,000. And those are identified as students with a specific learning disability, speech and language impairment, or developmental delay. A SPED 2 is 100% of the BSC. Those are students diagnosed with autism, hearing impairments, emotional disabilities, orthopedic impairments, intellectual impairments, or other health impairments. SPED 3 is 130% of the BSC. Students diagnosed with visual impairments, deaf, blindness, multiple disabilities, or TBI. Then we have gifted component, that's 5%. We assume that 5% of any school district has a gifted students. Then we take 5% of those students and we add that component. We're weighting CTE, 10% of the BSC. Concentrated poverty, we're adding 10% to that. So basically, if you have above a 35% ratio of concentrated poverty in your district, then you add 10% of the BSC times the number of students that are above 35%. Then we also have a sparsity component, which is important for those of us that live in rural areas. If you have 8 students or less per square mile, then we give you an additional component for sparsity because you got additional expenses for transportation and other costs needed to get those there. And so what you do is you take the base student costs, in this case, $66.95.34, and you may have a student that is a low income student, and they may be an English language learner or a SPED 2 student. And so you add all that together, and then that will tell you exactly what it costs. For a low income student, for example, you take your base student cost of $66.95, you add your low income component of $2,000, plus your English language learner component of $1,000, and then your SPED 2. So you add them all together, and so for a student like that, you're getting additional money up to $17,000 because that is what it's going to cost to instruct a student with those characteristics. And so you go through all of that and you add them together. Then you subtract the local contribution, which is the same as it has been, 27%, the lesser of 27%, or 28 mills. So that will ultimately give you your total allocation. And so that's, in this case, we are going to plus up education $230 million, which includes a health insurance increase of, I think, $12 million. So districts are held harmless for 3 years because what happened, if you recall, we kept, in order to get the $100 million last year extra and the teacher pay raise, we had to keep that outside of the MAP formula. So what that meant was there are districts that got more money than they would have otherwise gotten had the money but been run through the formula and evenly distributed throughout the districts. So there are some districts now that will receive less money because of the way that was done previously. And so we are going to hold those districts harmless for up to 3 years. And then generally within 1 or 2 years, they're back to even or above. And then there are some districts that have had a severe decline in enrollment. So we're going to hold those harmless for up to 3 years, give them a chance and opportunity to realize and come to understand that the money they're getting is what they're getting. This goes into effect, like I said, July 1st. We wanted to make this effective and repeal MAEP July 1 of next year. That really is the only concession we made to the House throughout this entire process and compromise. We also wanted an open and transparent hearings throughout the off session, bringing in experts to talk about the formula, run it several times, because as we know, this may not be perfect. MAEP wasn't perfect. There was changes made to that several years after it was passed. The House was unwilling to do that. And so we're going to direct the bill directs the department to provide us a report by November 1st on benefits, pros and cons, changes necessary to the formula. Moreover, I anticipate this committee in the off session will be discussing this even further, bringing the department in as well. So that is, I know there's a lot. I know there's going to be questions, but I'd be willing to answer any questions, obviously, at this time. So I'll open it up to Senator McMahon.
Senator Barr, I may have some other questions, but you said it has a repeal date in it? Because I'm looking.
We're repealing MAEP this year.
Does this new formula have a repeal date?
No, there is no repealer. It becomes effective July 1st of this year, the first day of the new fiscal year. And we're funding education this year based on this new formula. That's where we actually finished up the education budget contingent upon passage of this bill last night. And the funding will be based on calculated by using this new formula.
Do you have a numerical calculator that we can see?
Numerical spreadsheet?
Do you have a formula that we can actually see?
Yes, you
how
will.
that lays out?
Yep, we will see that all on the floor.
And we'll see that on the floor?
Yeah, basically it's your
Will that
BSC.
show a fiscal note for each school district
Yes,
as
it will.
well?
It'll show you how much each school district's going to be receiving. Senator Bryan.
Is there any sort of handout or summary or any information that is available to us at this committee meeting?
At this meeting, all you have is the bill before you.
This 350-page bill with no summary and no backup information. Is there a spreadsheet that shows how much money each district gets based on each factor in this new formula? In other words, you've got all these things that you add up and you get a total dollar amount the school district's getting. Do we have anything that shows that?
You will see a spreadsheet that shows the total allocation per fiscal year.
The total allocation,
Yes.
but nothing that shows how much each district is getting for each of these factors, such as you can't look and see how much a school district's getting for sparsity. You can't look and see how much a school district's getting for English second language learners. You don't have anything that shows how those factors vary from district to district.
Well, like I said earlier, we don't, but we are setting the BSC at a rate this year. The districts will provide that information like sparsity and ELL things to the department, and then that'll be used to calculate as we go forward.
Do we have anything that shows the same dollar amount of money being run through the existing law and the same amount of money being appropriated under the provisions of this bill in a comparison showing how much money each district would get under existing law and how much money each district would get with this new formula running the same dollar amount through both plans?
You'll have a sheet that shows what each district received last year, and then for 10 years going forward, what each district will receive under the new formula.
But we don't have anything that shows how much each district would have gotten if we just taken the same amount of money and put it through existing law and then the same dollar amount through this new formula. We don't have that. We're not going to get that.
No.
Okay. Can I ask some questions about the transportation feature?
Yes.
How is transportation paid for? Because under the current system, there is a transportation formula. How do you get your transportation money under this proposal?
That is going to be part of the ancillary expenses component. And like I said, it's 30% of the BSC.
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
So that's part of the base student cost. And so it's 30% of the BSC.
But each district gets the same amount of money for transportation per student, regardless of how many miles the school buses run.
Well, and that also plays into effect on the weight, the sparsity weight, which is one of the add-ons. So if you have less than 8 students per square mile, then that's where you get the extra money for the increased transportation costs for living in a rural district.
How did we decide on the figure of 8 students per square mile?
I believe that was taken from some of the federal guidelines that we have reviewed. I don't know for sure, but I think that's what it was.
But there hasn't been any study or any even attempt to find out how much it costs districts to transport students. In other words, I think that if under the existing transportation formula, like which so many things we do not fund, but at least there's an attempt to fund districts based on the cost of transporting students. And what I understand you're telling me is basically all of that's out the window. And so if the cost of transporting students goes through the roof, if the cost of gasoline goes through the roof, or if it goes down related to other costs, that won't be taken into account. So randomly, we don't know where they are, but there are districts out there that will be better off and worse off because transportation money is distributed just basically on a per student basis instead of being distributed on a basis of how many miles your buses are traveling.
Well, we've looked at the school districts and we determined that basically there was a calculation from looking at the districts and what their expenses have been previously. We know there's 88 districts in this state that will be classified as sparse, so they get that extra sparsity component. And we also fund through using EEF funds. We have fuel, a line item for fuel for school districts. So school districts are getting this formula. This bill allows for all of that. And basically this is determined from looking at the data that we have received in establishing this component.
I'd be interested in seeing that data, but looking at the sparsity formula, if there is a district which has a huge unpopulated area, the national forest, wildlife preserve, land that's under conservation easements or whatever, that basically has no students in it. So you don't run a school bus through there. That district would get credit for all those square miles because it happens to be in the district, and that plays into the sparsity formula, although they're not running buses there.
Well, we multiply that by the number of students that live in that sparsity district. So we are going to base it upon the number of students that live in that district.
No, but it's based on the number of students that live in the district. But if the students are all real close to the school, you have 2 districts identical in size, identical in sparsity and everything. But in one of the districts, there's 80% of the district is land that has no residents on it. It's a wildlife preserve, conservation easement or something. So you don't run buses in that 80% of the district, but you do run buses in the 20. You'll get the same amount of money as a district which has students spread throughout the whole area, and you would be running buses all over that area. So that district would be penalized compared to the other.
May or not be true. I'm not going to agree or disagree with you on that. You're going to have to run your bus throughout the entire district, regardless of where students are located. If you have a DeSoto National Forest in your district, like some of my districts do, you're going to drive around it. You're going to be spending fuel, you're going to be spending gas to pick these students up. So, that's why we include the sparsity component.
I'm sorry, does the sparsity feature have a cliff? In other words, if you've got 8 students per square mile or fewer, do you get the sparsity factor? Is this a situation where if you enroll one student, you lose a pile of money, or if you expel one student, you gain a pile of money? Or do we have a sliding scale?
It's based on the number of students.
Well, I was trying hurriedly to read the bill, and it appeared to me that there was some attempt to have a sliding scale in this committee substitute that's here before us that the House passed, but I can't tell. I'm not clever enough to tell that from reading the bill. We don't know.
Well, we have an inflationary adjustment in there every year. That's going to help.
Can I ask a few questions about special education?
Yes, you can.
Do we know if we are spending more state money or less state money based on the current expenditure and whatever we would be spending in this formula?
We haven't compared those statistics specifically, no.
So we don't know whether we're increasing funding for special education or cutting money for special education.
Well, in looking at the formula and running scenarios and looking at districts from this point forward, to me, we are breaking down these special ed students, providing additional money for them. There's like that previous example I mentioned, you're getting potentially up to 17,000 or more, rather than a flat BSC. So I think that's where the weights come into play is once you identify a student as SPED 1, 2, or 3, you're adding more money to help instruct that child. So I think we're putting more money into instructional and other needs for any SPED child.
But we don't have a breakdown of how much special education money each district is currently getting versus how much money they're getting under this formula.
No, we do not.
Is there any requirement that the special ed money be spent on special ed?
They have to, each district will have to complete an affidavit identifying what they're identifying special ed, ELL, low income, all these students. And if the district is found to be not in compliance with those or inflating those numbers, then the department will be able to recoup any money spent, misspent.
But I mean, are they getting an allocation of money which must be used for special education purposes, or are they just getting a lump sum of money?
Well, it's all part of the appropriation. It's going to be broken down. They'll spend it. The intention is to make sure it's spent on those special needs childs or ELL child or whatever the case may be.
I've seen a chart that someone had marked with which districts were benefiting from the hold harmless provision in this. Is there anything that you're aware that shows what would happen if there were no hold harmless provision?
It's my understanding that approximately 30 school districts, the first year would not receive as much under this new formula. By year 2, the vast majority are even or above, and then by the 3rd year, I think all of them will be level or above.
One of the things that bothers me is there are hundreds of pages of tax bills or sections, whatever, about taxes, and I can't follow all that. but there are provisions about how fee and lieu payments are counted and matters like that. And I'm not sure how that works now, how it would work under this formula and what the difference is.
It's my understanding, Sam, correct me, that nothing's changing regarding that. That's just bringing forth current existing law.
Well, it's hard to tell. There's underlining, and I understand that doesn't always mean anything, but how can I tell? What about how charter schools are funded? Is there any change in the way charter schools are funded in this bill as opposed to existing law?
To my knowledge, and I double checked with council this morning, there is no change. And I get confused about this, but there was a 1 cent sales tax for education, which was enacted in the 90s. It had money that was designated for teacher supplies, money that was designated to go into the public school building fund, and money that was to flow to districts for the purpose of capital improvements. And I can remember the first year that Senator Gordon went to the podium and said, well, we've got this formula that requires us to pay X amount of dollars. And then we've got this money over here that's supposed to go for capital improvements and all these things. And we're not going to give them all the right amount of money, but we're going to give them the flexibility to use this money as they will. And I said, well, then it's sort of like going to banks, and I've got a car payment and a house payment. I'm not going to make both of them, but I'm going to give the bank some money and give the bank the flexibility to apply the money like they'd want. And so as the years went by, we continued to give districts flexibility. And I think that the districts did not receive their $10 million, which they were supposed to get for capital improvements. And I don't think we were sending money to the public school building fund. And I think y'all may have repealed all of that a couple of years back. Do you know what the status of all of that is? That 1%, goes into EEF. That's existing law. That's not changing. The public school building loan fund that we passed a couple of years ago really has not been used at all. And if it has been, from what I'm told, districts are not able to utilize it because of procurement laws and things of that nature. So we are not going to, we're going to repeal that as well. And so districts will still get their EEF allocation. That's still flowing to that EF account. And that's where it's appropriated during the appropriations process.
I'm somewhat confused. Are those repeals in this bill?
Yes.
It really does continue to get worse. If the problem, you say the problem is procurement laws. So, by the way, I don't think that little feature's been discussed on the floor anywhere. If the problem is procurement laws, I assume those are state procurement laws, and we could avoid that by just exempting them from whatever additional state procurement laws there are. But we've chosen not to do that. So the principle behind the public school building fund was that the state could issue bonds at the state level, get a bit bigger interest rate, and very importantly, hold down issuance cost so that local school districts had credit at the state public school building fund. And they could borrow against those credits or get money through that fund, get money from the bonds that were issued at the state level for capital improvements. I think that was a big major feature of the consolidation process in the early 50s. We're doing away with that. Is there any statutory requirement that any money that otherwise would have gone to the public school building fund and to the districts for capital improvements? Is there any requirement that that money float to the districts?
Well, that's what the EEF is for. So we're still sending that to the districts. We're going to be giving them an additional $230 million to school districts this year. And we're going to, if we continue to fully fund it, we'll be adding another roughly $50 million, give or take, depending on pay raises and other factors every year to it. So the money's still going through that. Through the EF fund, we're fully funding education, giving them several $100 million more. And so that is why we have conformed the building loan fund and removed it.
But we raised the sales tax 1%. And we told people we were raising that for education so that we could do more for education. And as the years have gone by, I believe the teachers are still getting their supply money, but largely the 1 cent sales tax for education is a curiosity and a bookkeeping entry, but it's not producing the money for public education that we told everybody we were going to do when we passed the 1 cent sales tax for public education. But one of the features of that was that $20 million a year would flow to schools for capital improvements. 10 million through the public school building fund and 10 million directly. And so I'm gathering we don't have any specific provision at all now. Forget keeping up with inflation. We don't have any specific provision at all.
Well, I would disagree with you in that EF is not going to the districts. In the last several years, we have increased teacher supply cards, ELCs. We've done capital improvements for districts throughout this state. And so to say that EF is not flowing to the districts, in my opinion, is not correct. So the money is still going to go there through the EF fund. It's still going to be appropriated, whether or not there is a building loan law on the books. And so I would disagree with your characterization.
Well, I'm not saying that those specific dollars aren't going to the schools. I'm just saying if you look at the other money in the budget, it's just supplanting money in the other budget, and we write EEF on the far line. It makes it confusing to try to read an appropriations bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Hey, Senator Norwood. I'll come to you next, Senator Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, do have provisions in this legislation that would allow for the transfer of the funds back to the public schools that were provided to charter schools for students that return to the
That language, we still have an outstanding conference report on that on charter schools. And so we are hopeful that language will be put in that bill. So we have actually Senator Parker and I have been working on that to make that happen. Bless you.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
So I can't say if that's going to happen or not, because I can't tell you what the other end is going to do, but that's kind of our position at this point.
But it's not.
It's not in this language.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Senator Hickman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. So let's say that at some point, this body decides not to fully fund the formula. Where do the cuts happen? And I guess my question more so is, I think you're saying there's 30 hold harmless districts about what be included in this hold harmless agreement. So let's just say the legislature in its infinite wisdom comes in next year and said, we don't have the money to fund this. Where are the cuts coming in the formula, or what school districts? How does that work out?
First, that was one of the main reasons we wanted an objective formula. That way we could see what it's going to require to fully fund them. Obviously, in the past, we haven't with MAEP. That's a legislative decision. Hopefully, we don't be doing that in the future. However, there is provisions in this bill that say that if revenue declines, then we can level fund the base student cost. But if revenue even declines any further, as determined by the state economists, we can reduce the base student costs. So that is the only provisions that allow for protecting education. It has to be level funded unless the state economist says otherwise. But as far as where the cuts occur, it's just going to be running the formula to give us an amount, and then we decide, okay, if it's 3 billion and if we do less than that, then it's just going to be spread out that way, allocated through the formula.
Okay, so, but if we have, I guess my question is, would it not be an automatic adjustment of base student costs? Or do we come back and decide how to cut base student costs? I mean, I guess you're saying the only trigger or hold is that if it drops, we can level fund and every district will get what they got this year, on and on. But if we want to go lower than that, we'll come back and readjust the base student costs.
Basically, every year we have the inflationary adjustment, unless it's a recalc year. However, if revenue is declined as determined by the economists, then we can cut down to level. And if necessary, we can even cut a little bit less. But nothing changes in the law, Sam, that says the education can't be cut more than 5%, correct? So that law does not change.
And so I guess my concern is with these 30 hold harmless districts, what are the reasons we're holding some of these districts harmless?
Well, they're one, decline in enrollment. Two, like I said, we kept 100 million outside the formula last year, distributed by ADM, as well as that $240 million teacher pay raise. So that was sent to districts directly based on the number of students or teachers in that district, rather than put inside the formula where it's evenly distributed throughout the districts. So some districts receive more money than they would have otherwise received had the money been inside the formula. And so to prevent them from losing money under the new formula, that's why we held them harmless, because they would be receiving less.
And so I guess my question is, then some of these districts are districts that just benefited from us putting money outside of the formula. And then let's just say we decide to level fund for years, then they're receiving these extra benefits kind of over other school district in perpetuity.
Right. Well, generally what we try to do when the appropriations process is, if we have a teacher pay raise, we keep it outside the formula the first year and then put it inside the second year. That was not something the House was willing to do regarding the pay raise or the $100 million, but we weren't going to decline $100 million. So we took what we could at that point.
And I get it. I guess I'm not trying to rewrite history. I'm just trying to get an understanding. So my final question, I have a particular interest in these hold harmless agreements because I think I'm almost certain I have a district that's in that. But my district, I don't think it's because of population loss or because they were overfunded, but it's because we have been under a fee in lieu agreement. So I guess my question is, if they go under hold harmless this year, are they stuck there? Because I think we're coming out of the fee in lieu in this next year. And if the calculations go where they should go up above what this hold harmless hold them, will they be reevaluated next year, or are they stuck for these 3 years?
Well, they'll be held harmless unless the allocation is above that hold harmless amount.
So if we come
From
back,
what I understand, yes.
so if everything comes back on the roll, we come from out of the fee in lieu and it's calculated that we should receive more than what we received in the previous years under the hold harmless, they will then go into that.
That you have a unique situation. So I want to say yes, but I'm not going to, but Sam confirms that with me.
Thank you,
So,
Mr. Chairman.
thank
Thank
you,
you for your
Senator
work on
Hickman.
this.
Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 questions. So it's my understanding that what we know of as the 27% rule is still in place. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then I guess I actually have more than one question.
Subpart, right?
Yes.
1A, B, C.
This is a follow-up to my first. So then in lines 701 to 707, there is language that was deleted, and it's dealing with some fund. What was, and I know we're making changes to remove any reference to adequate education fund. How is that affecting that?
Well, I
And-
think we're pulling up that striked out language now.
The language that was deleted is the school ad valorem tax reduction fund. What is
Council
that?
indicates to me that that was removed just to make, to conform the language to the bill. Is that correct, Sam? Okay.
Is that what the school ad valorem tax reduction, is that part of the MAP?
It was a grant program at one time. It's obsolete and we just removed it to update the statute. Okay.
Okay. So the 27%, 55 mil, that's staying in place.
That's correct.
Okay. Now on to my second real question. So when we're with the base student costs, we're doing this. So when we come back every year, is this calculated by MDE
Yes.
on, and then they present it to the legislature
Yes.
based on the formula that's being put out here?
Yes,
So that when we go into session, we know what we're working with.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Senator Boyd.
First of all, I want to say thank you. This is a huge piece of legislation that y'all have worked to really fine tune and make sure that it's in the best format that y'all can know to be. And I want to thank you. I want to thank Sam, Leah, Max. I know the hours that y'all have put in on this, and it is a huge lift that y'all have given to this entire state. So thank you. But on that note too, y'all, I want to follow up on something Senator Bryan said too. He had a number of questions, really in regards to special education, accounting, questions also too that we may have in ELS. From what I understood you to say from the beginning, you would be the Department of Education would be coming back to us with greater data and reports in November that kind of sees how this is rolled out to begin with.
That's correct.
I would assume that this would be an ongoing process for the next couple of years, that we are going to see how this rolls out and how that they are spending money. And this gives us, by having these weights, it gives us a better opportunity to track money and see where schools are financially using money with this entire process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Also too, one of the things that we've talked about that we're all concerned about is making sure that the money that we're giving to school districts is being spent responsibly. And I would think that through this process, the way that y'all divided it out, it would give more opportunity for the department to really delve into those numbers just a little bit more. And I know somebody mentioned to me that this was something maybe that y'all were going to, we were going to look at in the fall, maybe looking, and the new superintendent was going to look at this. Is that correct? Am I remembering this correctly?
That's correct. Initially, our proposal to the House was we have joint hearings throughout the summer and the off session. That was not agreed to. So we're directing the department to make a report. I know SPED is very important to you and it is to all of us. And so that's going to be one of the areas we look at and how we can better improve the program.
Also, I mean, if the House doesn't want to do these, but really looking at that financial accountability piece of how, because we are giving districts a great deal more money. And so making sure that we put the measurements in place to make sure that money is being effectively spent in the classroom. If the House doesn't want to do it, I would encourage us to do that as well.
We plan to, and as you know, when it comes to the SPED children, the districts have thousands of pages of regulations and statutes they have to abide by. So our goal was to get as much money to the districts as possible to instruct the children that they have in their districts and give them
Yes.
flexibility to apply that money where they see
Yeah.
fit.
And beyond SPED, I think my concerns are just really drilling down and making sure that we're being good stewards of taxpayer dollars in regards to
Absolutely.
spending. But y'all have done a tremendous amount of work. This is a great opportunity for the state. And I want to thank y'all because I know the hours y'all spent on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Boyd. Senator Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo those thank yous. And I do want to just bring up one little thing that I found particularly, I guess, exciting about the bill. you know, a lot of times we have these meetings, we have committee meetings, and we use our abbreviations, we use other terms like that to describe things, but we may on this have some people who are listening who don't typically listen into a meeting like this. I know in our school district and as a parent, one thing that has always troubled me has been that we had a particular month during the year where there was this extreme push by parents and by the school district to try to have the kids in the school during this 3-week period or so that the calculation for dollars for the year would be maximized. I know particularly as a parent, we've had, you know, during that time, you know, it would be like, you know, dress up day or pajamas to school day or whatever it might be, because the school system knew that if during that period of time, lo and behold, we had, you know, a flu breakout, or if we had anything occur where the attendance went down dramatically, the formula and the funding would be impacted by that. And one particular feature from this bill that I think is important to mention is that I don't think the schools are going to have to worry about. Could you comment to that, Mr. Chairman, and just, you know, I guess let myself or other people know how you think that might help the consistency of the funding to, you know, reach the districts?
Yes, thank you, Senator Parker, for reminding me on that one. So when we calculate the number of students in our school districts throughout the state, currently we use ADA, average daily enrollment, and that is the process where Senator Parker said, where if we have a big flu outbreak, you're going to lose the number. We're counting students in a snapshot of 1 day a year, 2 days a year. However, under this new plan, we're using net enrollment. Net enrollment is calculated by using the last day of months 2 and 3 and averaging the number of students that district has. So we're getting we'll actually increase in the number of students in their districts, getting a better snapshot, better and accurate count of how many students are actually enrolled. And we're, you know, whether the student's there or not on a specific day, the district is going to have to instruct them and provide instruction for them. So we're getting better count and more accurate count for each school district using the net enrollment process.
And would you agree that that is probably in most scenarios going to result in more funding for that district?
It definitely will, yes.
Thank you for your work on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Parker. Senator Delano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo what Chairman Boyd said as well. This is great work. I know there's been a lot of efforts to try to come up with a more predictable formula over the years. We've looked at a lot of ways of accomplishing that, and I think that that this is definitely not new to any of us. If you've been around public education for a while, it's definitely something that we've looked at. Let me make sure that I understand this, and I want to see if I can simplify it a little bit more for some of my other colleagues on the other side of the chamber. So we have a base or a student-based cost that is going to be a number that we're going to that we've identified and that we're going to plug in, and then we're going to have the add-ons above that calculation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there going to be any caps on the total amount of add-in dollars that will be allocated to this overall formula, or can school districts look to maximize the dollars that are available by increasing the add-on programs or increasing services within these add-on programs that would have a risk of running the overall cost of this education budget?
There are no caps. This will allow districts, you know, in some cases, I'm sure you've heard where a SPED child, you know, will come to a district and they really don't want to enroll that child. This will allow them and provide them incentives, say, yes, we want to take that child. We want to provide the services because we know we're going to get paid to make it happen. And so CTE program, we're increased. We have a 10% weight on for CTE programs. So that'll encourage, hopefully, districts to further enroll students into CTE. Those kids who otherwise may not go to college, but leave high school with a a degree, a certification or licensure and so forth.
So what I've heard from school boards, really across the state, but specifically down in the coastal area, is that they've had a very difficult time using the old MAEP formula and trying to do any type of strategic planning or trying to understand how an investment in a particular program that is needed within the community that students need. They have a really difficult time understanding how, if they're going to have the dollars available for that program, or if they would receive any additional dollars because of the way the MAEP formula ran. What this formula will actually do, if I understand it correctly, is that each individual school district can almost have a live spreadsheet that they can watch from the school board level and see how their investments will respond in additional dollars or changes in dollars that they receive through this new formula. So it gives them a predictability of the formula that the school boards will be able to use for strategic planning, as well as capital improvement plans, and or they will have a longer pathway for understanding the revenues that will be available to them in future years, with much greater visibility than what they have currently under MAEP. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I think that is something that I've heard over and over and over again from our school boards. And I think that this would give them much more autonomy in trying to do what's best for children at our local level and our local schools. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this forward, and you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Leno. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, Senator McMahon.
Could I just one question?
Senator, I'm going to recognize Senator McMahon first.
So this piece of legislation, like I had not seen this until today. This creates 4 new code sections. It eliminates some code sections as well. And I'd really like to have an opportunity to talk with my superintendents about this and my education policy makers in North Mississippi. So I want to try to find a way to support this and move it forward. Well, I'd like to make a motion to put a 1-year repealer in this piece of legislation.
You're not recognized for that.
Okay.
Senator Bryan.
I apologize for interrupting. I thought we were about to wind up. I'm trying to find where in the bill is the provision about recalculation of the formula.
Look through my notes here. I believe that's going to be in section 4, Senator Bryan. Sam is getting that specific line for you right now. Line 274. Yeah, 274 to 290.
Well, that seems to me to say that in the future that we've adopted a formula and we've set a fixed dollar amount. And there's an inflation factor. And so we never do a recalculation. From now on, it's just this inflation factor.
No, we do a recalculation every 4 years. It's in there.
I mean, that's what I was trying to find.
in fiscal year 2029, every fourth year thereafter, the Board of Education shall submit to the legislature a new proposed base student cost using the following formula. But that's not the recalculation, right? Yeah, it is.
Well, I guess what I'm concerned about is this, and honestly, I'm trying my best to figure all this out. One of the dilemmas is that if we're in a period of inflation, which it appears like we're going to be for a while, which is going to be a greater amount than the 20-year rolling average, because we've got in that 20 years built in a number of years of very, very low inflation. We're not going to have much growth from year to year, and inflation is going to eat up the dollar amount. But then if the cost of retirement goes up, the cost of health insurance goes up, or teachers' salaries are increased, how will those things work their way into the formula?
The teacher salaries will be conformed into the statute during the recalculation years. This is the same language what we passed the last 2 years with our Senate MAEP adjustments. So this is the same thing that you voted for 2 years. This is the same language.
Well, what I'm concerned about, though, is what's going to happen in future years, and I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Okay, thank you, Senator Bryan. Seeing no further questions, Senator Parker, you make a motion? Committee sub? Not committee sub? Okay, title sufficient, do pass. You've heard the motion from Senator Parker. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Hear a motion for rise and report. So move. Please leave your bills there unless you're taking it to the floor with you. Chrissy and them are going to take them up there for you, unless you don't leave it.